Hi friends, I'm back with another interview from HotDocs, which is showcasing a lot of Canadian and international documentaries here at this year's 30th anniversary festival. So this interview I'm about to share with you is with filmmaker Tonje Hessen Schei, whose film Praying for Armageddon has premiered here at the festival to really great audience reactions. She speaks with me about the film, the topic about evangelists and the evangelical movement in the US, and sort of the way that it's infiltrating American politics, but also starting to influence foreign politics as well. Super interesting film. I really enjoy speaking with Tonje, and I hope that you enjoy our interview as well.
Hi, friends. I'm sitting here with filmmaker Tonje Hessen Schei, and we're going to be speaking about her documentary Praying for Armageddon, which is screening here at HotDocs, Canadian International Documentary Film Festival. Welcome, Tonje. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Maybe let's start. I usually start with an introduction, a little bit about yourself, and sort of your starting into documentary filmmaking.
So, my name is Tonje Hessen Schei. I'm a Norwegian director. I've been making documentaries since '96. I kind of knew what I wanted to do from an early age, but kind of, went into documentary from a journalistic point. But then after studying journalism for about a year, I jumped over to the film department at UT Austin.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you were one of the people who are like, this is it. I'm very much, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, I think, for me, telling stories and especially giving a voice to people that weren't able to tell their stories for some reason. I started with when I was about 14. And then I just knew that I just had this sort of drive that I had to follow.
Excellent.
Yeah. And I do think that, I have I'm so grateful for this job. I think being a filmmaker is one of the most exciting things that I still can think about doing. So it makes me happy,
That's
even though
great.
handling pretty intense subject matters in my film. Yeah, it is. It's I think just being a storyteller is what drives me in my work.
Yeah, and then it really is about storytelling and also I guess making audiences think about the stories that you're bringing to us as well, and making us question a lot of things, which I really appreciate about this film that we're going to be speaking about. So, Praying for Armageddon, maybe share a little bit about how the story came to you, or what was the impetus for starting the film.
Yes. So actually, it all started here at HotDocs in 2015 when my producer wanted to make a film looking at the Christian evangelical movement in the States and how they were affecting the situation in Israel and Palestine. And then we started looking into, the hidden agenda behind all this, which was their belief in the biblical prophecy of Armageddon, and where they basically interpret the Bible literally and see themselves as the chosen ones that have a responsibility to act out God's will and speed up the end times. And when we first started looking into this, it for me resonated a lot. I married into an American fundamentalist evangelical and American Jewish family. So this issue had been very prevalent in my life for quite some time. And also when I moved to the US from Norway, I was very shocked by the lack of knowledge in the American population about what goes on in Israel and Palestine. And also, you know, because there is hardly any coverage of this in the US media. So this issue has been important for me for a long time, but then realizing the amount of power, the real power that the evangelicals have from the grassroots, megachurch empires, all the way up to the political system, just that's when we were like, you know, we have to make this film. I mean, it's so important that people realize what is going on. And that you have this fusion between religion and politics in the States, but to when you start looking at, you know, what does this mean and what do these people believe in, and when you have people in power that are pushing for the end of our civilization, that is, you know, quite mind-blowing, and people need to be aware of that.
Yes, thank you for saying for bringing that up, because there is so much underlying misinformation too in terms of what's accessible to everyday people in the U.S. in terms of what's happening in the world, let alone Palestine and the Israel occupation. So I'm curious about that connection that you made with the journalist as well, that allowed you, in a way, to sort of navigate the story a little bit and kind of take us on this journey of meeting different people and traveling as well to Palestine.
Yeah, so I met Li Fang, you know, through my last film, I, Human, which is a film on how artificial intelligence is changing our lives and our world. And getting to know Li, I also knew that he has a lot of experience from the political system, looking at lobby groups in DC. And while we were working on A Human, we started talking about praying for Armageddon. And at that time, he was also working on a story on some of the most powerful pro-Israel religious lobby groups in DC. So then we decided to join forces in this film, and Lee's investigations, as well as our, you know, investigations on the film team, just became sort of a very powerful drive as we were making the film.
Was there anything in your research that was surprising to you in terms of some of the information that you uncovered? There's a lot of information in terms of the money that's funneled to, you know, to Israel and from specific sources. And I was surprised by a lot of things, but anything that surprised you or your team?
Yeah, I mean, this has been a pretty mind-blowing journey, to be honest with you. I mean, we started about 8 years ago, before Trump, Pence, and COVID. And what has unfolded during this time, like, definitely like made us kind of question if the end time was in fact upon us, you know. But I think the most shocking to me was to actually see sort of the architecture that's already in place for the evangelical or fundamentalist evangelical power in the States, and how deeply ingrained it is in sort of the dark backrooms in Washington, D.C., where you have Bible study groups for Republicans, where they're being trained to use biblical justifications for their policies, but also to see how embedded they are in the U.S. military, where they're recruiting young soldiers into the Christian nationalist movement, was also really shocking. And even just, you know, I mean, the fact that you even have Bible citations engraved into the rifle scopes of American soldiers, that just, you know, gives you chills, because one of the things that the US military has been accused of is sort of being part of this new crusade, right? And when you have Bible citations on rifle scopes, and you have, you know, all their symbolisms on their different badges and stuff, with crosses and crusader helmets. I mean, it's symbolism is important, right? Language is important. And when you see also the very much like language of war, you kind of feel like in these mega churches we went into, I mean, it's like they're getting ready for a holy war from the grassroots all the way up to the top, and that's very, very frightening. And it surprised me just to see how normalized this has become too, and how destructive it is. And when you think about what's happening in the States now, you know, you also see how threatening this is to the U.S. democracy, as well as U.S. foreign policy.
I think so. And I think, as you said, I was surprised by a lot of the stuff you mentioned, but also at the level of organization that they have, right? In terms of even from the smaller groups, like I can't recall the name, but the ones who are on the bikes and they're touring across the US on this mission, right? And they have the swords. And like you said, they're like ready for this. It is like a crusade in the sense that they are training warriors, as they say, and and the mission is sort of explained in a way that is, you know, for the better of the world. But I think what was surprising to me too is that the average person doesn't realize that there's a political undertone in all of this that's happening. So I appreciate that you bring that forth, that we get these two layers as well, that there's tension. There's the religious aspect and the political that's driving this religious uprising in a way. And but you also mentioned accessing the mega churches, and I was curious about how you navigated access to not just the churches, but also the people that you were so candid with you in telling you their intentions.
Yeah, I mean, getting access into the, you know, I mean, any fundamentalist movement takes a long time, right? And on our team, like in the way, you know, this is a big international production, and we have local teams in both the US and Israel and Palestine. And that was very important to me also, is just to have representation on our team that live in these realities, and that could really sort of bring out the story from the inside of these movements. And my co-director, Michael Rowley, comes from an evangelical family. Both his parents were pastors, and he also comes from the same area in Texas that Gary Bird and M25 has their base. So when Michael came on board, like, we had been working with Gary for a couple of years, but when Michael came, and, you know, them being so close and sort of coming from the same background, it really allowed us to build a stronger trust and bond with Gary. And also, you know, Michael, like, just he's a beautiful director, and the way that he was able to lift up Gary's story in the film is really great.
Yes, it's very genuine. You know, it comes across as being very genuine, and in terms of having created some level of trust that he's so forthcoming. You mentioned working with people in Israel and Palestine, and what was that like in terms of receiving that footage and putting sort of putting it into context with everything else that you have from the US in terms of editing? I'm curious about those decisions.
Yeah, well, you know, after 8 years, you definitely have a lot of materials, and but working with people, especially in East Jerusalem and in Gaza, was you know, hard in a lot of ways, because their situation and the consequences that we were looking at in the film, and just life there is so brutal. But it was also, you know, we became really close, and they were sort of our eyes on the ground the whole time. So we had daily check-ins for long periods of time during the production. And the way that I work with a team is it's kind of a big co-creation, right? So it was important for me too to sort of let them be their, think about what stories they wanted to lift up and tell us. Fantastic team. The Gaza Film Collective we worked with, the things we got from them was especially heartbreaking. There's so many things that we don't see in the mass media coverage of the Israel military actions that are taking and the bombings that are taking place in Gaza. So, but for us, it's also important to say that this film is not about the Israel-Palestine conflict. This film looks at how the evangelicals or the fundamentalist evangelicals are funding right-wing projects in Israel that is increasing the cycles of violence or intensifying them. But that, the stories that we were following in East Jerusalem all of a sudden like directly were influenced by money that was coming from the US evangelicals supporting settler organizations in East Jerusalem that were evicting Palestinian families. And all of a sudden, like all this spiraled into to this massive bombing campaign in Gaza that, killed hundreds and hundreds of people and a lot of children. So that's what you see, how this unfolds in the film.
Yeah, and I actually think it brings it really home in a way that, we're making connections in terms of how this movement in the US is impacting other lives in other parts of the world, right? And I think that's the disconnect that we see, that's missing in a lot of the media, that coverage that you were talking about, that we don't get to see how maybe my donation is going to affect what is happening in other parts of the world. And it's also the narrative that the pastors and the preachers kind of tell their congregations, right? They use as you mentioned, the Bible quite literally in terms of justifying that, the way that they use the funds. So in terms of, kind of the film has been seen in other places. So I'm kind of curious in terms of the reactions that you've experienced after people seeing the film, and anything that might have surprised you from these screenings.
Well, I think that we just had our world premiere at CPH Docs and had sold out screenings in Copenhagen and a very strong response from the international audience. Then we've been to It's All True in Brazil, that also we got great response from. And in Brazil too, we also see how this issue resonates with the Brazilian people, because there's so many similarities between how the evangelicals are sort of making up the backbone of the Republican Party, and how the evangelicals were lifting up Bolsonaro as, being put as a president from God, or lifted up by God, as they say. But also in Brazil, they even had like biker ministries, just like M25 and Gary. They even have biker ministries that were part of, Bolsonaro's sort of core group. And you also see there that the evangelicals were part of the storming of the event in Brazil. So there's a lot of similarities, and that's one other thing that's important with this film is this is not just a US issue. It's not just an Israel and Palestinian issue. It is a global movement, because the fundamentalist evangelical push for the end time is also a worldwide phenomena. And it is an issue that we have to take seriously, because they also are tied, as we see across the world, to institutions of power. So when you have such a strong force that's actually setting out to destroy our civilization, we better pay attention to what's going on.
Yes, it's almost eerily connected, as you know, across the world. It's too organized in a way to let it pass without thinking, you know, how it could impact us tomorrow even. I'm curious what the reaction is going to be in the US, but I'm also more curious because you're going to be screening the film here at HotDocs. I think it's tonight, correct?
Our premiere, our North American premiere, is here at HotDocs tomorrow. At,
tomorrow,
8
yes.
p.m. Yes.
Excellent.
And I just have to say that for me, like most of my films have screened at HotDocs, and I'm so impressed always with the engagement and the passion of the audience here in Toronto. So I can't wait for tomorrow. I'm really excited to meet people and to see the response that the film has on the Toronto audience. And then, you know, hopefully we'll be able to make some sound waves that resonates across the border as well, because this film really needs to be seen in the US.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm curious about too, how this premiere can propel it in the US and elsewhere where it's necessary. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I really learned a lot and appreciate your work, and looking forward to seeing what's next.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.